Today we come to talk to us a little bit about his newly elected position, but let me give you his background. He received his undergraduate business degree from Washington and Lee University and his Juris Doctorate from Villanova University.
As Lisa said, on January 1st, I was honored to be sworn in as the newest circuit judge in the 13th Judicial District. It was the position that Larry Chandler held, who retired last year. And Judge Chandler had been judge for about 20 years, so I think he was well respected around the state for his wisdom and integrity. So I've got quite a bar to meet, but certainly going to make my best efforts to do that. The 13th Judicial District is the largest geographic district in Arkansas. It's got 6 counties: Columbia, Union, Washita, Dallas, Cleveland, and Calhoun. And there are 6 judges that cover that circuit. Some years ago, when the folks in Little Rock decided that everybody ought to play by their rules, we used to have specialized judges to do either the civil area, the criminal area, domestic relations, juvenile. But everybody had to have a little piece of everything. So they came up with a plan which seems to have worked the last few years. So I've come into it with certain duties. Mine are going to be all the juvenile cases in Calhoun and Dallas counties, all the juvenile and adult felony cases in Cleveland County, all the delinquency cases in Union County, all the Department of Human Services cases in Washita County, and then here in Columbia County I've got all the probate, all the juvenile, all the adult felony, and 1/4 of the domestic relations. But I'll spend most of my time on criminal cases and juvenile, which is all right, because my background as far as being prosecutor and then later being a public defender, I was in those courts a lot. When we had our new judge orientation in Little Rock back in December, there are 15 new circuit judges around the state, which I think is the second largest group to come in. And there are some people who are going to go through shock, because there are a lot of attorneys who don't practice in juvenile court at all. And so there are going to be some judges who are in for some real shock. I think, from having read the paper over the last few years, that y'all had an opportunity to hear things about drug court. You heard an opportunity to hear about alternative sentencing. I'm going to touch on those a little. The main thing I think I want to talk about today is more about the juvenile court area. I wondered really about having been invited to do this, as if I'm supposed to talk about my vast experience about being a judge. Well, it's been for 4 weeks. Although I have been surprised, because even after 32 years of practice, there hasn't been a week gone by that I haven't seen something new, either some new excuse, some new mistake that somebody's made. As it was last week, Mr. Butler and I had a deal that neither of us had to do, having to do with forcing somebody to go testify in a trial in another state and having to go through that hearing. So always something new. In the area of criminal law, the main thing I want to talk about there, as it relates to alternative sentencing, as I hope maybe all will think about, the balancing act that's going on there is a judge has to balance, punishment versus mercy anyway. What has come up in the last decade or more is that we've also had to take into consideration a practical problem, is that there's only so many spaces that you can lock people up when you get into the punishment aspect. The penitentiaries are full. Because of that, the county jails are full. We've got people sitting in county jails who have been there for months after having been sentenced to the penitentiary. It's a whole other issue about the problem about finances, since the state's being a little slow about paying the counties about, unless something's changed, Judge, I don't know. So all those have to be taken into account, and since that's your big threat over people that behave, you've got to kind of work into something else to make that mean something. You also work in that over the last 15 years or so, there's been a school of thought that maybe we ought to look into some other things. In the old days, you talked about people going to the penitentiary and, oh, they're going to get rehabilitated. I don't know of anybody who's ever been rehabilitated in penitentiary, because basically it's a housing situation. You stick people away, and maybe you don't have to worry about them doing things while they're there. But now they started getting, maybe there's some other things to do. That's how the concept of drug courts came around, which I'm a firm believer in. I think that that's worked. And then now the alternative sentencing, the idea being that if you've got folks who don't have a prior record, they made this one mistake, and maybe we can give them a chance that they don't get saddled with a felony forever if they do certain things. Our program now involves that people plead guilty, you take their plea under advisement, they're required to do certain things, stay drug-free, pay their restitution, get their education, and then after a certain period of time, if they've done that, you go back in, let them withdraw their plea, dismiss the case, and then they can go and hopefully you don't see them again. Based on our studies locally, the recidivism rate is really low. I think we made a lot of difference in people's lives. One thing I'd like you to consider, though, in regard to that, is we have really put a strain on adult ed. And we've been forcefully suggesting to people about getting their GEDs, getting their wage certificates, and we've been able to help that program through some monies through adult probation, but it's getting crowded out there, and I expect we're to use that more. I'm planning on expanding that, as I'll talk about a little more in juvenile stuff, but about requiring some parents to go and things like that. So we're going to be expanding the number of folks going to adult ed. They can always use tutors, so if anybody's got an interest in that area, if you'll talk to Diane Carey at Adult Ed, they would be thrilled to have some folks come in and help. I did talk to a retired president, or past president of the Retired Teachers Association, saying maybe their folks are getting bored, they might want to give them a call. Anyway, keep that in mind. Juvenile court is frankly the toughest area of law that I've seen, and there are two aspects of it. One is called dependency neglect, and that's the cases that the Department of Human Services is involved on. Those are where you've had children who've been abused or neglected, and states had to get involved. Sometimes they're put in foster care, but in almost every time they're removed from the parent until such time as they can show that they should get their children back. And there are time frames in there, basically, if they don't come back up to speed within the course of a year, then you're looking at terminating parental rights. One area of volunteering that, if you want to consider, there's a group called Court-Appointed Special Advocates, CASA for short. Basically what they are is an arm of the judge. You've got attorneys for the children, you've got attorneys for the parents, you've got attorneys for the Department of Human Services. Everybody's got their own agenda in investigating the case. These are volunteers who come in, they volunteer to work as many cases they want, but they keep them, usually they're only involved in one at a time, and they can go out and follow up, and they can check at the school, and they can go by and make inspections of the home, and sometimes their report is a little different than that from the Department of Human Services, and the judge gets to take that into account. Over the course of time, there have been different people who've done it. One of my biggest surprises was when former Judge Rodney Chambers showed up for a period of time. I know Sandra's worked with CASA before, but I'll warn you up front, there are very few happy times in juvenile court. You have some happy endings sometimes, but it can be emotional, and you go into it with a guarded heart when you do it. Now, the other part, and when you hear about more than that, has to do with the delinquency aspect, and that's where juveniles are accused of committing crimes, or what we call family need services petitions, where they haven't committed a crime, but the court needs to get involved. The vast majority of those cases have to do with either discipline problems at school, or that they're not going to school, and you've got attendance problems. You see a lot of things. We've had petitions filed by parents. You have to deal with all of them at some point for, well, they just won't clean their room and things like that. So we get a whole range of things. I had one in El Rey last time that mom and son actually came to blows over things, but it's challenging also. We started a juvenile drug court a few years ago to try to deal with the drug issues sooner, so that maybe you don't have to see them in adult court, but it's frustrating. I don't think an adult docket ever goes by that you haven't had somebody who had been in the juvenile system and they didn't learn their lessons, so we're having to deal with them in adult court. A lot of these cases have to do with the breakdown at home. And it can be something that really isn't a parent's fault. Maybe mom or dad are working 2 or 3 jobs. Kids are just kind of left on their own. And when that happens and they don't have some type of supervision or discipline at home, it's going to spill over into the schools and it's going to spill over into the streets. We did start a mentoring program, and that's one thing I would like you to consider. If anybody's interested in that, it doesn't have to take a lot of time. If you've got so many juveniles, especially young men, boys, who don't have a really good father figure, uncle figure, grandfather figure, however you want to look at it, and they really need that to see that there is something else. I'm going to be trying some real, what may turn out to be naive things in juvenile court to try to make some changes. I was always frustrated by the numbers of aunts and grandparents showing up. I'm going to start requiring more parents to actually be there with their kids. I've already started in a case that I'm concerned about ordering drug tests on parents. Is I'm going to come down hard on the kid because he keeps testing positive for marijuana, and there's a pretty good suspicion it's happening at home, then the parents are going to have to start passing tests too. One thing I also learned is that since parents are parties, I can pretty much do what I want to. So we're going to start having some parents doing community service. We're going to start having some parents serving jail time. I feel the same way about education. I'm going to have to get tough on some kid because he's not showing up from school. If they don't believe that education is important at home, there needs to be an attitude adjustment about parents too. So they're going to start giving me the information about education levels on parents, and if they're not working, they're going to be ordered to go get their GED, go get their wage certificate. It's going to put some more pressure on adult ed, so we're going to need some more tutors. But my view is this is my chance. If you want to get a hold of a juvenile, it's got to be during this time frame. I had one in El Dorado, my first day of court in juvenile court in El Dorado, and a young lady who I court on the 5th. She was going to turn 18 on the 15th of January, and she continued to test positive. She had then tested positive for meth. The case had just been opened because of that, and I frankly told her that as I look back on it, one of my regrets is going to be that I only got to see her a week and a half before she turned 18. That so I don't have to worry, at least on my watch. I locked her up at juvenile detention so they could release her when she turns 18. So at least I had a pretty good idea she wanted to use and end up on the front page of the paper in a ditch somewhere for that period of time. But it's that type of thing that we're going to see. But my feeling is if we don't get a hold of the juveniles, then it's going to be problems for our community. It affects us right now because if they're acting out in school, then that's taking the teacher away from teaching. That's disrupting the other students. So we got to get a handle on them right then, and that's what I'm saying. If you'll think about mentoring, then we can find a place for you to kind of show kids another side of life and why they should look at it differently. I have started trying to come up with, I came up with a list of names, and what prompted this is I read a survey in November about the number of people who knew who Neil Armstrong was. and it was like 15% knew first guy to walk on the moon. And, you know, we all grew up reading everything we could read. We knew things about history. There's all these restrictions now. You don't have, I don't even think they have study halls anymore in school unless something's changed. You know, libraries, kids don't know what a book is anymore. Everything's electronic. So I'm going to start having book reports. I'm going to start handing out cards saying, when you come back, I want you to tell me about this person, primarily how they overcame it. Every one of them thinks life's not fair to them. You know, they're being picked on. So I've come up with some names about folks who actually had adversity, and here's how they've overcome. You tell me about that. And I've also, on the ones that you know that the family's really trying, I told a kid I want him to go interview his mother, works as hard as she can. He's causing her trouble. She's missing work. So you sit down with your mom. You find out all she's had to do to sacrifice for you. When you come back to court, you tell me about that. In the hopes that maybe there'll be a better appreciation in that regard. It's going to be a challenge. I've been very surprised about how well I've liked it. It sounds terrible. I really like being a judge. Last year, Judge Wright in Pope had told me, David, it'll be the best job. Matter of fact, if we all knew how much fun it was and how much we enjoyed it, we would skip being lawyers and just gone straight to being judges. But I'm looking forward to it. I hope I make an impact in lives. And anyway, that's things right now. If I've been asked whether or not, what about the stress and all that? And I told people frankly that the biggest cause of stress in my life was judges. So anyway, that's kind of it. And I hope you're satisfied after 4 weeks that that's the report for now. You can ask me again in a couple of years, but if you got any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
Not necessarily about being judged, but how do you get to be licensed before the Supreme Court?
You have to be licensed in the state. An attorney who is already licensed before the Supreme Court has to nominate you, and then you send all your paperwork to them, and they say, yep, you meet the criteria, which frankly aren't a lot of criteria. It's kind of like the U.S. tax court. You do is sit in your application and your fee, and they'll send you a certificate.
Have to be admitted 3 years.
When I first started, one of my, I guess, mentors, Steve Crane, said, David, get as many certificates as you can because you get to charge $10 an hour per certificate. I think it was a joke. And you have to keep up. You don't get in trouble and things like that.
Hey, you have a routine. You mentioned you had 6 different counties, but you go to a certain county every day. You have a routine. You know where you're going every day.
I got 12 already set days each month going around. And that's also difficult. With 6 judges, I worked on my calendar, which I basically kept Judge Chandler's. I wanted to make one change about Dallas County. And then my first one I went in, then the courtroom wasn't available and somebody else had it. And then the next one I went in, the circuit judges were fine, but I didn't realize Dallas County Municipal Court had court that day. I set another one, and then of course you also have to fit in all the other lawyers if they're going to be with another judge. So finally we found the afternoon I wanted. But and then the rest of the time would be if there's special settings, which will happen, like trials. I've got trials scheduled now all the way into April, just to try to move things along. We were in a little, I'm sure y'all know, but because Judge Chandler, we already knew he was going to retire, but when he got some health news last September, then he's been out since then, and the other judges were filling in. So things kind of stacked up a little, and so we're trying to get things back caught up around. My first day in Calhoun County, they said, oh, there's 4 cases a year that's filed in DHS court. but they were all on that first day, so we were there till 6 o'clock that night. Cleveland County, something similar, but we were there till 7 o'clock my first day, but that's only because they stacked up. And it doesn't matter what time you finish in Rising, you get home late. All right, I know it's getting close to 1, but anything else I can answer quickly? Okay, again, thank you very much.